Book V, Canto 8 of the Faerie Queene. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jou. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book V, The Legend of Artegall, Canto 8. Prince Arthur and Sir Artegall free Samient from feare. They slay the Soudan, drive his wife Adisha to despair. Nought under heaven so strongly doth allure the sense of man, and all his mind possesse, as beauties lovely bait, that doth procure great warriors oft their rigour to represse, and mighty hands forget their manlinesse, drawn with the power of a heart-robbing eye, and wrapt in fetters of a golden tresse, that can with melting pleasance mollify their hardened hearts, enured to blood and cruelty. So whilome learned that mighty Jewish Swaine, each of whose locks did match a man in might, to lay his spoils before his lemans traine. So also did that great Oetean knight, for his loves sake his lions skin undight. And so did warlike Antony neglect the worlds whole rule for Cleopatras sight. Such wondrous power hath womens faire aspect to captive men, and make them all the world reject. Yet could it not fterne Artegall retaine, nor hold from fweete of his avowed quest, which he had undertane to gloryane, but left his love all be her ftrong request, faire Britomart in languor and unrest, and rode himfelfe upon his firft intent, ne day nor night did ever idly rest, ne wight but only Talus with him went, the true guide of his way and virtuous government. So travelling, he chaunft far off to heed a damzell flying on a palfrey fast before two knights, that after her did speed with all their power, and her full faith fiercely chast, in hope to have her overhent at last. Yet fled she fast, and both them far outwent, carried with wings of feare like fowl aghaft, with locks all loose, and raiment all to rent. And ever as she rode, her eye was backward bent. Soon after these he saw another knight, that after those two former rode apace, with fpeare in rest, and pricked with all his might. So ran they all, as they had been at bafe, they being chast, that did others chace. At length he saw the hindmost overtake one of those two, and force him turn his face. However loth he were his way to flake, yet mott he all gates now abide, and answer make. But the other ftill purfued the fearfull mayd, who ftill from him as fast away did fly, ne once for aught her fpeedy passage stayd, till that at length she did before her spy Sir Artegall, to whom she ftreight did hie with gladfull haft, in hope of him to get fuccour against her greedy enemy. Who feeing her approach, gan forward set, to fave her from her feare, and him from force to let. But he, like hound full greedy of his prey, being impatient of impediment, continued ftill his courfe, and by the way thought with his fpeare him quite have overwent. So both together ylike felly bent, like fiercely met. But Artegall was ftronger, and better skilled in tilt and tournament, and bore him quite out of his saddle, longer than two fpeares length. So mischiefe overmatcht the wronger. And in his fall misfortune him mistooke, for on his head unhappily he pight, that his own weight his neck asunder broke, and left there dead. Meanwhile the other knight defeated had the other fayter quite, and all his bowels in his body braft, whom leaving there in that dispiteous plight, he ran still on, thinking to follow fast his other fellow pagan, which before him paft. Instead of whom, finding there ready preft Sir Artegall, without discretion he at him ran, with ready fpeare in reft, who feeing him come still fo fiercely on, againft him made againe. So both anon together met, and ftrongly either ftrooke and broke their fpeares, yet neither has forgone his horfes backe, yet to and fro long fhooke, and tottered like two towers, which through a tempeft quooke. But when againe they had recovered fence, they drew their fwords in mind to make amends for what their fpeares had failed of their pretence. Which when the damzell, who thofe deadly ends of both her foes had feene, and now her friends, for her beginning a more fearefull fray, she to them runnes in haft, and her haire rends, crying to them their cruel hands to ftay, until they both do heare what fhe to them will say. They ftayed their hands, when fhe thus gan to fpeake: Ah, gentle knights, what meane ye thus unwife Upon yourfelves anothers wrong to wreake? I am the wronged, whom ye did enterprize Both to redrefle, and both redreft likewife. Witnefle the Paynims both, whom ye may see there dead on ground. What do ye then devife of more revenge? If more, then I am fhe, which was the root of all. End your revenge on me. Whom when they heard fo say, they looked about, to weet if it were true, as fhe had told. Where when they faw their foes dead out of doubt, eftfoones they gan their wrathfull hands to hold, And ventails reare, each other to behold. Though when as Artegall did Arthur vew, So faire a creature, and so wondrous bold, He much admir'd both his heart and hew, And toucht with entire infection nigh him drew. Saying, Sir Knight, of pardon I you pray, That all unweeting have you wronged thus fore, Suffering my hand against my heart to ftray. Which if ye pleafe forgive, I will therefore yield for amends my felfe yours evermore, Or whatfo penance fhall by you be red. To whom the Prince: Certes me needeth more to crave the fame, whom error fo misled, As that I did miftake the living for the dead. But fith ye pleafe, that both our blames fhall die, Amends may for the trefpafle foone be made, Since neither is endamadged much thereby, So can they both themfelves full eath perfwade To faire accordance, and both faults to fhade. Either embracing other lovingly, And fwearing faith to either on his blade, Never thenceforth to nourifh enmity, But either others caufe to maintaine mutually. Then Artegall gan of the Prince enquire, What were thofe knights, which there on ground were layd, And had received their follies worthy hire, And for what caufe they chafed fo that mayd. Certes I wot not well, the Prince then faid, But by adventure found them faring fo, As by the way unweetingly I ftrayd. And lo, the damzel's felfe, whence all did grow, Of whom we may at will the whole occafion know. Then they that damzel called to them nigh, And asked her, what were thofe two her fone, From whom fhe earft fo faft away did fly, And what was fhe her felfe fo woe begone, And for what caufe purfued of them at one. To whom fhe thus: Then wot ye well, that I do ferve a Queene, that not far hence doth wone, A Princeffe of great powre and majefty, Famous through all the world, and honoured far and nigh. Her name Mercilla moft men ufe to call, That is a maiden Queene of high renowne, For her great bounty knowen over all, And foveraine grace, with which her royal crowne She doth fupport, and ftrongly beateth downe The malice of her foes, which her envy, And at her happinefle do fret and frowne. Yet she her felfe the more doth magnify, And even to her foes her mercies multiply. Mongft many which maligne her happy ftate, There is a mighty man, which wons hereby, That with moft fell defpight and deadly hate Seekes to fubvert her crowne and dignity, And all his powre doth thereunto apply. And her good knights, of which fo brave a band Serves her as any princefle under sky, He either fpoiles, if they againft him ftand, Or to his part allures, and bribeth underhand. Ne him fufficeth all the wrong and ill, Which he unto her people does each day, But that he feekes by traitorous traines to fpill Her perfon, and her facred felfe to flay. That O ye heavens defend and turne away From her, unto the miscreant himfelfe, That neither hath religion nor fay, But makes his God of his ungodly pelfe, And idols ferves, fo let his idols ferve the elfe. To all which cruel tyranny, they say, He is provoked and ftirred up day and night By his bad wife, that hight Adiciay, Who counsels him through confidence of might To breake all bonds of law and rules of right. For fhe herfelfe profeffeth mortal foe To juftice, and againft her ftill doth fight, Working to all, that love her, deadly woe, And making all her knights and people to do fo. Which my liege Lady feeing, thought it beft With that his wife in friendly wife to deale, For ftint of ftrife and ftablifhment of reft, Both to herfelfe and to her commonweale, And all for paft difpleafures to repeale. So me in meflage unto her fhe fent, To treat with her by way of enterdeale Of finall peace and faire attonement, Which might concluded be by mutuall confent. All times have wont fafe paffage to afford To meffengers, that come for caufes juft. But this proud dame, difdayning all accord, Not onely into bitter termes forth bruft, Reviling me and rayling as fhe luft, But laftly to make proof of utmoft fhame, Me like a dog fhe out of doores did thruft, Miscalling me by many a bitter name, That never did her ill, ne once deferved blame. And laftly, that no fhame might wanting be, When I was gone, foone after me fhe fent Thefe two falfe knights, whom there ye lying fee, To be by them difhonoured and fhent. But thankt be God, and your good hardiment, They have the price of their owne folly payd. So faid this damzell, that hight Samient, And to thofe knights, for their fo noble ayd, Herfelfe moft gratefull fhewed, and heaped thanks repayd. But they, now having throughly heard and feene All thofe great wrongs, the which that mayd complained To have been done againft her Lady Queene By that proud dame, which her fo much difdayned, Were moved much thereat, and twixt them fayned With all their force to worke avengement ftrong Upon the Souldan felfe, which it maintayned, And on his Lady, the author of that wrong, And upon all thofe knights, that did to her belong. But thinking beft by counterfeit difguife To their defigne to make the eafier way, They did this complot twixt themfelves devize. Firft, that Sir Artegall should him array Like one of thofe two knights, which dead there lay, And then that damzell, the fad Samient, Should as his purchaft prize with him convay Unto the Souldan's court, her to prefent Unto his fcornfull Lady, that for her had fent. So as they had devized, Sir Artegall him clad in the armour of a pagan knight, And taking with him as his vanquifhed thrall That damzell, led her to the Souldan's right, Where foone as his proud wife of her had fight, Forth of her window as fhe looking lay, She weened ftreight it was her Paynim knight, Which brought that damzell as his purchaft pray, And fent to him a page, that mote dired his way. Who bringing them to their appointed place, Offred his fervice to difarme the knight. But he refufing him to let unlace, For doubt to be difcovered by his fight, Kept himfelfe ftill in his ftrange armour dight. Soon after whom the Prince arrived there, And fending to the Souldan in defpight A bold defiance, did of him require That damzell, whom he held as wrongfull prifoner. Wherewith the Souldan all with fury fraught, Swearing and banning moft blafphemoufly, Commanded ftreight his armour to be brought, And mounting ftreight uppon a chariot high, With iron wheeles and hookes armed dreadfully, And drawn of cruell fteedes, which he had fed With flefh of men, whom through fell tyranny He flaughtred had, and ere they were halfe dead, Their bodies to his beafts for provender did fpread. So forth he came, all in a coat of plate, Burnifht with bloody ruft, whiles on the greene The Briton Prince him ready did await, In gliftering armes right goodly well befeene, That fhone as bright as doth the heaven fheene. And by his ftirrup Talus did attend, Playing his pages part, as he had been Before direded by his lord, to the end He fhould his flaile to finall execution bend. Thus go they both together to their geare, With like fierce mindes, but meanings different. For the proud Souldan with prefumptuous cheare, And countenance fublime and infolent, Sought onely flaughter and avengement. But the brave Prince for honour and for right, Gainft tortious powre and lawlefle regiment, In the behalfe of wronged weake did fight, More in his caufes truth he trufted then in might. Like to the Thracian tyrant, who they fay Unto his horfes gave his guefts for meat, Till he himfelfe was made their greedy pray, And torn in pieces by Alcides great. So thought the Souldan in his follies threat, Either the Prince in pieces to have torn With his fharpe wheeles in his firft ragious heat, Or under his fierce horfes feet have borne, And trampled downe in duft his thoughts difdained fcorne. But the bold child that perill well efpying, If he too rafhly to his chariot drew, Gave way unto his horfes fpeedy flying, And their refiftlefle rigour did efchew. Yet as he pafled by, the Pagan threw A fhivering dart with fo impetuous force, That had he not it fhunned with heedfull vew, It had himfelfe transfixed, or his horfe, Or made them both one mafle, withouten more remorfe. Oft drew the Prince unto his chariot nigh, In hope fome ftroke to faften on him neare. But he was mounted in his feat fo high, And his wing-footed courfers him did beare So faft away, that ere his ready fpeare He could advance, he farre was gone and paft. Yet ftill he him did follow every where, And followed was of him likewife full faft, So long as in his fteedes the flaming breath did laft. Againe the Pagan threw another dart, Of which he had with him abundant ftore On every fide of his embatteld cart, And of all other weapons lefle or more, Which warlike ufes had devized of yore. The wicked fhaft guided through the airy wide By fome bad fpirit, that it to mifchiefe bore, Stayd not, till through his curret it did glide, And made a grisly wound in his enriven fide. Much was he grieved with that haplefle throe, That opened had the wellfpring of his blood. But much the more, that to his hatefull foe He mote not come, to wreake his wrathfull mood, That made him rave, like to a lyon wood, Which being wounded of the huntfmans hand, Can not come neare him in the covert wood, Where he with boughes hath built his fhady ftand, And fenced himfelfe about with many a flaming brand. Still when he fought to approach unto him nigh, His chariot wheeles about him whirled round, And made him back againe as faft to fly. And eke his fteedes, like to an hungry hound, That hunting after game hath carrion found, So cruelly did him purfew and chace, That his good fteed, all were he much renound For noble courage and for hardy race, Durft not endure their fight, but fled from place to place. Thus long they traced, and traverfed to and fro, Seeking by every way to make fome breach. Yet could the Prince not nigh unto him goe, That one fure ftroke he might unto him reach, Whereby his ftrengths aflay he might him teach. At laft from his vidorious fhield he drew The vaile, which did his powerfull light empeach, And comming full before his horfes vew, As they upon him preft, it plaine to them did fhow. Like lightning flafh, that hath the gazer burned, So did the fight thereof their fence difmay, That backe againe upon themfelves they turned, And with their rider ran perforce away. Ne could the Souldan them from flying ftay With raines or wonted rule, as well he knew. Nought feared they what he could do or say, But the onely feare, that was before their vew, From which like mazed deere difmayfully they flew. Faft did they fly, as them their feet could beare, High over hills, and lowly over dales, As they were followed of their former feare. In vaine the pagan bands, and fweares and rales, And backe with both his hands unto him hales The resty reines, regarded now no more. He to them calls and fpeakes, yet nought avales, They heare him not, they have forgot his law, But goe which way they lift, their guide they have forlore. As when the fiery mouthed fteedes, which drew The funnes bright wane to Phaetons decay, Soone as they did the monftrous Scorpion vew, With ugly craples crawling in their way, The dreadfull fight did them fo fore affray, That their well knowen courfes they forwent, And leading the ever burning lamps aftray, This lower world nigh all to afhes brent, And left their fcorched path yet in the firmament. Such was the fury of thefe headftrong fteedes, Soone as the infants funlike fhield they faw, That all obedience both to words and deedes They quite forgot, and fcorned all former law. Through woods and rocks and mountaines they did draw The iron chariot, and the wheeles did teare, And toft the Paynim without feare or awe. From fide to fide they toft him here and there, Crying to them in vaine, that nould his crying heare. Yet ftill the Prince purfued him clofe behind, Oft making offer him to fmite, But found no eafie meanes according to his mind. At laft they have all overthrowne to ground, Quite topfide turvy, and the pagan hound Amongft the iron hookes and grapples keene, Torn all to rags, and rent with many a wound, That no whole piece of him was to be feene, But fcattered all about, and ftrowed upon the greene. Like as the curfed fon of Theseus, That following his chace in dewy morne, To fly his ftepdames loves outrageous, Of his owne fteedes was all to pieces torne, And his faire limbs left in the wood forlorne. That for his fake Diana did lament, And all the woody nymphs did wayle and mourne, So was this Souldan rapt and all to rent, That of his shape appeared no little monument. Onely his fhield and armour, which there lay, Though nothing whole, but all to bruifed and broken, He up did take, and with him brought away, That mote remaine for an eternall token To all, mongft whom this story fhould be spoken, How worthily by heavens high decree Juftice that day of wrong her felfe had wroken, That all men, which that spectacle did see, By like enfample mote for ever warned be. So on a tree before the tyrants dore He caufed them to be hung in all mens fight, To be a monument for evermore. Which when his Lady from the castles hight Beheld, it much appalled her troubled fpright. Yet not as women wont in dolefull fit, She was difmayd, or fainted through affright, But gathered unto her troubled wit. and gan eftfoones device to be avenged for it. Streight downe fhe ran, like an enraged cow, that is berobbed of her youngling deare, with knife in hand, and fatally did vow to wreake her on that maiden messenger, whom fhe had caused be kept as prifoner by Artegall, misweend for her owne knight, that brought her backe. And comming present there, fhe at her ran with all her force and might, all flaming with revenge and furious despight. Like raging Ino, when with knife in hand She threw her husbands murdred infant out, or fell Medea, when on Colchicke ftrand her brothers bones fhe scattered all about. Or as that madding mother mongft the rout of Bacchus priefts her owne deare flefh did teare. Yet neither Ino nor Medea ftout, nor all the Maenades fo furious were, as this bold woman, when fhe faw that damzell there. But Artegall, being thereof aware, did ftay her cruell hand, ere fhe her wrought. And as fhe did herfelfe to ftrike prepare, out of her fift the wicked weapon caught, with that like one enfeloned or diftraught She forth did rome, whether her rage her bore with frantique passion, and with fury fraught. And breaking forth out at a postern dore, unto the wild wood ran, her dolours to deplore. As a mad bitch, when as the frantique fit her burning tongue with rage inflamed hath, doth run at random, and with furious bit snatching at every thing, doth wreake her wrath on man and beaft, that cometh in her path. There they do say, that fhe transformed was into a tyger, and that tygers fcath in cruelty and outrage fhe did pass, to prove her surname true, that fhe imposed has. Then Artegall himfelfe discovering plaine, did iffue forth gainft all that warlike rout of knights and armed men, which did maintaine that ladies part, and to the Soldan lout. All which he did aflault with courage ftout, all were they nigh 100 knights of name, and like wild goats them chafed all about, flying from place to place with coward fhame, so that with finall force them all he overcame. Then caufed he the gates be opened wide, and there the Prince, as victor of that day, with triumph entertained and glorified, prefenting him with all the rich array and royal pomp, which there long hidden lay, purchafed through lawlefle powre and tortious wrong of that proud Soldan, whom he erft did flay. So both for reft, there having ftayd not long, marcht with that mayd, fit matter for another fong. End of Canto 8, Book 5. The Legend of Artegall.